us to seize the day.
When you look around, see the tears falling down. In a world so cold, where there seems to be no hope, so just look inside. There's an answer waiting, because you and I, we were created to love, created to love. We've got one chance to make a change in the world around us that's falling down, because we've got one life to live. So take every moment and seize the day, So take this time.
Roughly 1 in 100 people are diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder every year in the UK, meaning there's roughly 700,000 people living with autism in the UK alone.
There is no known single cause for autism spectrum disorder, but it is generally accepted that it is caused by abnormalities in brain structure or function.
The general stereotype is that more boys are affected than girls. This is actually not true. More boys are diagnosed with autism than girls, and the reason for this is that girls are far better at copying with their what we call neurotypical, which is a fancy word of saying normal, peers in order to fit in, meaning that they are often diagnosed in their teens, in adulthood, or not at all. It is therefore believed that there is a 50-50 split on who is affected.
Some brain scans show differences in the shape and the structure of the brain in people with autism compared to in neurotypical people. However, it is not known how accurate this is. There is also evidence to suggest that people with certain genetic disorders are more likely to have autism or autistic tendencies.
It all started here, at a building we like to call the House of Nightmares.
Its real name is Night Rider House, and this is where I first met the word autism. The story started for me with a meeting with a teacher at school. She said that I seemed to be struggling in many areas of my learning, and that she wanted to get me tested to see if I had any learning difficulties. I had a wonderfully patronising psychologist named Josh, who liked to say things such as, "How does that make you feel?" And that must be difficult. Yes, very, very patronising. 2 awkward appointments with him later, and I was being referred to a children's centre in Coxheath, where I would soon get my final diagnosis.
I originally found out about autism through Hayley, after she was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. We share a lot of qualities, which made me think that maybe I might have this autism thing too. I eventually managed to persuade my parents to talk to the GP, and I was referred to Night Rider House for a first assessment. After that, I had to go to Tunbridge Wells for my final assessment, and I was diagnosed with high-functioning autism, which is slightly different from Asperger's.
There's no one reaction to a piece of news like this. On the one hand, I was relieved because I finally had an answer, something where I could say, this is why I'm different. But on the other hand, I knew nothing about this, and to me that was terrifying. I did enjoy researching it because, as always, it's always interesting to learn something new. But there was still a big part of me that didn't really want to accept this label.
I, on the other hand, had been expecting them to say that I was autistic, and had already accepted the fact. I had also done a lot of research about autism online beforehand, so I already knew quite a lot about it. I did, however, feel the same sense of relief that I finally had a reason that I was different.
There's a saying in the world of autism which goes, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. This is because everyone's story is different and everyone is affected in different ways.
To demonstrate this, we spoke to one of our friends who also has autism. He's called Gareth and was diagnosed in 2014 as an adult, meaning that he didn't get support for most of his life.
When did you get diagnosed?
That would be at the age of 22.
Which was how long ago?
That would be, hang on, no, that's not 20. 24? Yeah, 24, 2 years ago. That would be 2014.
What kind of led up to that?
Oh, it's quite an interesting thing, really. It started out when I was in school. Everyone notices a little bit different, but not much really came of it, except a few people taking me under their wing and helping me out, that sort of thing. Back then, autism wasn't so much of a thing. But basically, I went to university and started to notice that when it came to sort of like things like A-level mathematics I had to study, I started not doing very well. And my lecturer said, okay, the thing is, we need to get you tested, see if you have dyscalculia, which is number dyslexia. So they put me through the test of number dyscalculia and worked out, no, I have a very good understanding of basic mathematics. It's just there are small mistakes that have nothing to do with the confusion of numbers. So it became a question of, okay, if it's not that, then what is it? So I started doing a bit of research, and it turns out my genetic disorder that I have, 50% of the people who suffer from it have autism or autistic related tendencies. So I thought, okay, maybe we could follow that line of reasoning. So it took about 3 years to get things going, because obviously being diagnosed as an adult is very complicated and expensive. And in the end, the university themselves tested me, and basically said, we have no idea why no one's ever noticed this. I was a little bit relieved, to be honest, and a little bit excited. I know that sounds weird, but it's like having a new toy. It sounds a bit weird, but you know.
Oh yeah, I understand that.
As time went on, I began to get a little nervous, to be honest, a little bit afraid. I mean, first of all, he's like, you have autism. It's like, finally, I have an answer.
Yeah.
I know why I'm different. And you're like, this is really cool, you know, I know nothing about this, I need to learn about it. And then you start learning about it, start reading things, and all of a sudden you're like, this could be a big problem, which I'm sure you already know.
Oh yeah, especially having got into stuff for the talking things. And then we're finding out more and more things and going, oh, I didn't know that.
Tell me about it.
What about the people around you, like family and things, how were they about it?
I'll be honest, not many accepted it. My mum did, to some degree after a fashion. To this day, my dad and my auntie's side of the family still outright deny that I'm autistic. My dad, I think it's more of a case, he's always wanted me to blend in, you know, be a part of the crowd. And to accept that I'm autistic means accepting I'll never be like that. It's complicated. A few of my friends, even one of my best friends actually, who studies psychology, wouldn't believe I was autistic. Which I think is more denial than actual anything logical.
Seeing as you were diagnosed as an adult, are there things that you look back on from when you were a child and you say, yeah, that fits?
A lot, yes. A few examples. When I was at school, I used to run around the playground, my arm stuck behind my back, because a fun game for me. Everyone would watch, and all of a sudden, everyone concluded that I was playing fairies. It was at this point when I heard of that, I thought, has no one ever seen Sonic the Hedgehog? You know, I was always different. I was very distracted until someone taught me to focus my concentration. Funnily enough, I was sewing. Because you lose concentration when you're sewing, it hurts.
Yeah, been there, done that.
Yes. So there was quite a few things I look back on. One of the main things is I've never really been that great at making friends. I have a few select people who end up quite close, and those are friends that tend to stick around for a very long time. I mean, my oldest best friend is, 16 years, ever since I moved to Maidstone. So, I make long-lasting friendships, and it's a case of I'll be friendly with others, but you know, it's always had very few friends, but friends I know will come back to me.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge for you since you've been diagnosed?
Finding my place, to be honest.
So you and I have had conversations before about sensory sensitivities and things.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell the camera a little bit about those?
Well, I've been trying to figure that out actually. It's been quite interesting trying to find out what sensitivities I have and what I don't. I've learned very quickly I have a touch sensitivity, for instance. Playing around with this in my hands because it's something that helps calm me. The touch distracts from the emotions running beneath. I have a light sensitivity, to some degree noise as well. I don't have them out, but I have some very big headphones which cover the entire ear, and it's very hard to hear anybody when I'm wearing them. Then I can play music. It's a nice pattern, rhythmic. It's something I can focus on rather than just chaotic noise. So I'd say the three big ones would be noise, touch, and light and colours. I mean, one big thing is bright colours. If there are bright colours in the environment, I'll often end up staring at them.
Okay, what's your opinion about awareness of autism and how much of it there is?
So this is where I have a very interesting opinion. I can see both sides of the fence. On the one hand, autism diagnosis, people being diagnosed with autism, is shooting sky high. A lot of people believe this is because autism is more an evolutionary response to an environment where technology becomes much more a part of our lives. A lot of people who are autistic tend to be very good with technology. I myself, computer scientist. So it's a case of, in some ways I believe that people should stop promoting it so excessively, particularly when they promote the wrong ideas. I mean, a lot of people see autism as being retarded, which is highly offensive. Nothing wrong with being retarded, but being branded with that brush when you're not is very offensive. It's a case of there needs to be more awareness, but of the right thing.
How important is routine and structure for you?
Very important. I discovered quite early on that routine is a big thing. When you're dealing with everyday life, particularly from an autistic perspective, it can be a little difficult to adjust to the way things just come flying at you. Sudden decisions to go somewhere that you don't know, things like that. So having a routine is very helpful because you cannot do anything about life throwing unexpected things at you. It's life. The best thing to do, I find, is simply to make a plan, figure out how you're going to do things, and that's about preparing beforehand. It helps lessen the anxiety of an oncoming day. You have at least an idea of what you want to happen. And in that case, every time something happens that you plan to happen at a specific time, it makes you feel better.
Gareth mentioned that finding his place has been the hardest bit, and I can definitely relate to this.
Support is something that is very important for people on the autism spectrum, but is unfortunately something that not many people get.
I was unlucky in that the school I attend didn't really know anything about autism, and for a long time they were under the impression that because they'd never encountered a student with it before, it was impossible for me to be on the spectrum, which of course isn't true. The sad truth here is I'm not the first person to have this issue, and I won't be the last. Very recently, however, I have been getting some of the support that I should have had years ago. Even if I did have to metaphorically hit people in order to get it, it has been helpful.
My school, however, have been very supportive. 2 months after my diagnosis, my parents and I had a meeting with my head of year to discuss what things could be put in place to help support me in lessons as well as exams. They also discussed me going to see the school's learning mentor once or twice a fortnight to help improve my social skills and make me more able to talk to my teachers.
Although I didn't have any general support from school for a long time, there were a few teachers who seemed to pick up on things and be helpful. One in particular being my English teacher. And there's a particular experience I can tell you about here, which was one day when we were doing group work, which is my worst nightmare, and the teacher seemed to notice that I was struggling, so she sent me out of the classroom. I was a bit worried at first about what she was going to say to me, but it turned out she just wanted to give me some space to calm down, which was nice. And then we had a nice conversation in which we determined that actually I could do the group work by myself most of the time.
One of the places support has been most present is Brigade, which is mainly thanks to the church's youth minister, Alistair, who's probably been the only person to actually ask us what things could be put in place to support us, rather than just suggesting things. This isn't to say that it's not good to suggest things, but autism affects everyone differently, so asking about the things we struggle with in particular is always a good idea. Although some of the other leaders seem to struggle with understanding it first, our talk in February gave them some more information to help them support us.
We wanted to show you just how helpful Alistair has been.
So, naturally, we forced him to sit in a chair and answer our questions.
When I started working with you, I would have picked up on certain aspects of it. Not entirely sure I would have known directly, particularly with you, Emily. I'm not sure I would have picked up directly that there was autism there. Something for us to be dealing with. Hayley, you kind of showed some signs. But I think I would suggest that actually it's got stronger with it. There's been more evidence of it in the last 2 or 3 years. I think it's really important. I think for us to actually be able to do our job properly, from whether you're a volunteer or someone that's working an employed status, you actually got to make sure that everything you're doing, you've got to try and balance it. And one of the things, particularly that became evident at the thing you did in February, was that actually I don't know enough. How can we help you? And what can we do to make life easy for you? That's the main question I want to ask. How would I describe you, both of you, separately or as a whole?
It's up to you.
Yes, because as a whole, you actually make a really good unit. You work really well together. Individually, you're both kooky, a little bit odd, but that's what makes you special and what makes you part of the group, because actually without you the group is quite regularly empty. It's been, I think one of the main things is we just need to be aware that if you're having a kind of an issue with kind of sensory issues, you're having a kind of sensory timeout, then we need to be aware that you need those timeouts. And we need to be aware that you need that time to go and find a space somewhere. But also to not get agitated when you don't join in. Because that's one of the big things with some of our leaders and our volunteers, is that actually we've done a lot of planning and prep that we just don't get agitated if you're not joining in.
We've been going to Brigade for 10 years. That's as long as we've been friends.
Well, 11 actually, but we weren't always as understood as we are now.
I definitely think we used to copy our peers a lot, which is why it went unnoticed for so long. But looking back, there are lots of things that make more sense now than they did back then.
One example with Brigades is that we've never really liked playing games. Games is generally things like Stuck in the Mud and Quick Cricket. To those who have led games, I cannot stress enough that this is not because they are physical games, although a complete lack of coordination definitely doesn't help.
It's definitely more of an anxiety issue. I mean, think about it logically. It gets very noisy in that room. Everyone is running around unpredictably, and generally game rules tend to change at any moment.
Many autistic people are helped by being able to prepare themselves for what's going to happen, and games is just not a situation where that has ever been possible.
The changes that have been made have been very helpful. A good example of this is one night at Brigades when the sounds and the smells and all the sensory, were just a little bit too much for me. Especially the lights, they were really bright for some reason. And my best way of dealing with sensory overload is to go somewhere quiet and dark. Whilst quiet isn't really a thing you get around here, I have my headphones, and music is a good thing that I like to use to block out sounds, so that was fine. The other thing was blocking out the light. So I put my head down on the table with my arms around it, so there was no light. And though this may seem odd to people, not everyone understood really what was going on. People seemed to get that they just needed to give me time and space to recover.
It may not seem as obvious to everyone else, but we've definitely noticed an increase in understanding and patience for our struggles and needs. So thank you to all of the brigade staff for putting up with us and doing what you can to help.
We love you. Great. Something we both found very helpful is mixing with other people on the autism spectrum.
There's an element of what's known as herd mentality amongst autistic people, and the best example of this was when we were outside of an autistic youth club waiting for someone to come and open the door, and in our cold and excited state, myself and Haley started bouncing on the spot.
Rather than thinking we were weird like most neurotypical people would do, the rest of the group actually joined in, which was mildly entertaining.
We actually discovered this youth group, which goes by the name of Stokers, via a leaflet Haley found in an information pack she was given when she was diagnosed.
I really wish I'd read this information pack sooner, as coming to Stokers changed our lives.
I struggled to make friends at first, but after I got to know a few people, I found it easy to make friends, to go out and to talk to people more.
Do you have lots of friends here?
Yeah. Edith and Nat and they're my friends. Found out by the Senko at school, Mrs. Cook. I found out that she got us leaflets for this youth club. Yeah.
And how long have you been coming here?
4 years.
Here, being able to meet people that I wouldn't meet at school or college, and just having a friendly group I can chat with.
I would recommend it if you want to make friends. It's amazing. It's good if you want to make friends because you can actually do that with us.
Originally, it was my older brother that attended Stokers. Back when I was in year 11, maybe. Then he quit, but I joined soon after he stopped, and I love it here. Absolute absolutely love it.
We wanted to see just how much people know about autism already.
And how much they think they know.
So, we asked people to fill out a questionnaire and take a quiz.
Yes, but a questionnaire and a quiz wasn't quite enough for us, was it?
We decided to take this one step further.
We got people to sit in a chair and answer our questions.
Yes, we love doing that.
Roll VT.
So, how important is it that people are aware of challenges faced by people on the autism spectrum and why?
I think it's very important. I think because it's something that a lot of people don't understand, or a lot of misconceptions about it. I think if people on the spectrum are going to be accepted as, you know, in society and going to be able to work in jobs and things like that, I think people need to understand and be able to perhaps adjust things, change things.
Let's ask this again. Would you have known if we hadn't told you that we were autistic?
I don't think I would have, because I think I knew you before I knew that you were autistic, so to me, you were just great friends. So.
How much do you know about autism?
A wee bit. So that was 3 syllables. There we are, that's your answer. I'm a man of few words, believe that, believe anything. Right.
Before your talk, very little. I think I knew that obviously it was a condition. I knew that people suffered different characteristics because of it, but I also knew that it was a range, but very, very little about the sort of detail or the suffering, particularly the information about the inability to hear clearly or to understand, or the input into their mind. I wasn't aware of how much that affected people with autism.
So, what questions do you have about autism?
None that I can think of off the top of my head.
I'd be interested in how many groups there are in aid of autism, because you hear different groups about cancer, like Macmillan, cancer research, but you don't hear enough about autism and who it affects. So I'd like to know, well, actually, are there organisations out there that actually promote autism awareness? That's what I'd like to know.
What questions do you have about autism?
What questions do I have? I suppose I would be quite interested to know about the varieties of sort of diagnosis, or you know, the varieties and the means by which diagnosis happens. If that makes sense. Diagnosis might not be the right word, but you know, because it's not an illness, but you know what I mean, hopefully.
Let's be real for a minute though. Dan and Tamsin are the cutest thing since Fan.
Well, yeah, but getting back to the subject at hand, it would seem people really don't know all that much about autism.
You know what that means?
We get to brainwash them all?
No, we get to educate them.
Oh, well, that's less interesting.
Just go with it.
Fine.
It's thought that 90% of people with an autism spectrum disorder also have sensory difficulties. These can be related to any of the senses, balance and body awareness.
People affected by this can be both undersensitive and oversensitive. The difference is that undersensitivity, you don't get enough sensory input, so you seek ways to get more. With oversensitivity, you get too much sensory input. And that can cause sensory overload, which can also cause meltdowns.
I mean, for me personally, I can have both. When I'm out in public, particularly in crowded, noisy areas, I tend to be more oversensitive, which can cause sensory overload, as I notice things other people would think of as just background noise and drown out, such as people talking loudly. Whereas when I'm at home, I'm usually more undersensitive. I'm especially sensitive to light though, like wherever I am. And when I was younger, I'd sometimes have to sit in the shade just to get out of the sun for a while, or even occasionally go inside. I mean, nowadays, after school, like I always straight away go into my room, which almost always has the curtain drawn,
and sit in the dark for an hour or so.
I'm pretty similar, but I'm more sound sensitive than you, I think. And you seem to be more light sensitive than I am. I'm also very touch sensitive, which can be awkward sometimes because I tend to have a reflex reaction when people touch me unexpectedly, which can range from like, you know, jumping and screaming to actually physically hitting whoever it was that touched me. You can see why that'd be awkward. Like there was one time when I was in a maze, which will remain unnamed, and there was just this very enthusiastic actor who decided he was just gonna touch me, get up in my face, and talk very loudly.
I remember that, and weren't we told specifically that none of the actors in there will touch you?
Yeah, we were. Ridiculous. It's actually ridiculous. Well, I tend to wear my headphones a lot in public because it helps block out a lot of the background noises, like, you know, children screaming, generally loud things. And another good coping mechanism is to have something to fiddle with. Whether it be like a little plastic dinosaur or a stress ball, you can see I've always got something like that with me. Things of different textures. You know, it's comforting to have something that's like familiar texture. And it provides sensory input, which distracts away from the issues.
If you ever see anyone having a meltdown, the most important thing to do is not stare judgmentally at the person. A meltdown is an involuntary response to an information overload, so it's not their fault.
If you can ask other people to move away and lower their voices, it could be helpful for the person as well. The main thing is to either leave the person with whoever they're with or help them to get somewhere quiet.
Emotions can be very powerful for autistic people, and they have their own ways of coping with that input. One way is through something known as stimming, which is short for self-stimulatory behaviour.
Stimming manifests itself in many forms, one being repetitive motions such as rocking, flapping and bouncing.
We all need a certain amount of sensory stimulation to feel comfortable, and if it doesn't happen in the ordinary run of things, stimming can be a way to get it. It's also just a nice experience, something that you do because it feels good, calming you down, helping you relax.
Another way in which people stim is through something known as echolalia. This is the repeating of sounds, phrases and words, not for any particular meaning, but just because you like the sound of them.
There's also tactile stimming, which is most commonly rubbing the skin with hands or with another object, and auditory stimming, which can be listening to the same song or noise over and over again, snapping fingers, tapping ears, or making vocal noises.
There is, however, a fair amount of controversy about stimming. Some professionals say it's a bad thing and will stop a person from learning, but I actually think it helps them to learn as they experience new sensations and explore the world.
Some also say it doesn't achieve anything, but as we have said, it provides comforting and familiar sensory input, which can help an autistic person to cope with emotions, to focus, or just to feel good.
If you didn't already think that autism was complicated enough, you might be surprised to find that just under 50% of people on the spectrum have either a learning disability or other condition alongside.
I'm a good example of this, as I have ADHD alongside my autism. ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder and affects my ability to concentrate and stay focused. It also means I fidget a lot and I find it hard to stay still for long periods of time, hence why you've probably seen me fidgeting in a lot of our videos.
Some of the most common ones are ADHD, dyspraxia, dyslexia, sensory processing disorder, hyperlexia, speech impairments such as a stutter, and epilepsy.
To make things more complicated, mental health issues are much more common in autistic people than neurotypical people. This includes depression, anxiety, social anxiety disorder, and OCD.
The danger here is that with all these conditions in the mix, it's easy to end up being diagnosed with the wrong thing.
If you have an assessment, and on that day only some of your traits show, say you showed more signs of ADHD than autism on that particular day, you could be diagnosed with ADHD when it's actually autism.
This means that many people aren't getting the help that they need because they've been misdiagnosed. It also causes confusion, as diagnoses are hard to process anyway, but when you're given the wrong one, it's even worse.
Have you ever seen someone line up their favourite trains or obsessively collect magazines? People on the autism spectrum tend to have very restricted interests and will often become fixated on one thing, which they may obsess over. Many people see this as a bad thing, but it can very easily be applied to real life.
If you think about it, having these obsessions is actually really useful. Say someone's interested in trains. They will likely know everything they can possibly know about trains. This can be channeled into work that a person could do, so for example they could become a train driver.
There's a stereotype with autism that it is a children's disorder. This is not true. There are plenty of autistic adults out there, and autistic children grow to be autistic adults with just as many, if not more, difficulties.
The adult world is a difficult place for anyone, but especially people with autism. The main difference is rules. The adult world is a lot less clear about what is and isn't expected, which means it's very easy for autistic people who may not know the unwritten rules of society to mess up.
There's also the anxiety of telling people that you're autistic. It's not that we're ashamed of it, but with the social anxiety people on the spectrum already have to deal with, the added uncertainty just makes us want to avoid the whole situation.
It definitely helps if you try not to say things like, "You don't look it," as this can come across as offensive. It's okay to think these things, but just don't say them out loud.
And while we're on the subject of things not to say, please don't ever claim that everyone is a little bit autistic. We understand why you might think this, because everyone can have traits or tendencies that are associated with autism, but this does not make you a little bit autistic.
There's a lot of stigma around autism, but one thing I can definitely tell you is we are not stupid. So if you're working with or know anyone with autism, please be patient.
There are some things we're really good at, and some things we will struggle with, and we may not always ask for help, so don't be afraid to offer it.
Also, if you ever see someone having a meltdown, or maybe you talk to someone and they don't respond in the way that you're expecting, or they don't respond at all, think before you judge. You never know what that person might be going through.
Also, don't stare. If you're curious, ask. We may not have great social skills, but we'd much rather you ask questions than just stared at us. Learn more.
Think, how can I help?
Tell your friends and family.
And together,
we can create a society
where autistic people can finally be